Imagine eating a single piece of bread and suddenly feeling like you're on fire. Your skin blisters, your limbs spasm, and your mind fractures into a terrifying, hallucinogenic nightmare. This wasn't a rare curse, it was a common, recurring reality for thousands of years. We often look at ancient humans as survivors of the elements, but we rarely talk about the moments when their own environment turned against their sanity. The phenomenon is called St. Anthony's Fire. It struck medieval Europe with brutal regularity. Entire villages would fall into a collective state of madness. People would dance until they dropped, scream at invisible demons, and suffer from gangrenous limbs that literally blackened and fell off. For centuries, nobody knew why. They blamed demons, witchcraft, or divine wrath. They prayed to St. Anthony for mercy, thinking his touch could cure the fire. But the culprit wasn't spiritual. It was a fungus called ergot. Ergot is a parasite that grows on rye. When a rainy spring followed by a warm summer hit, the rye crops would sprout black, finger-like growths. If a farmer harvested that grain, he wasn't just harvesting food. He was harvesting a potent chemical relative of LSD. In 944 AD, a massive outbreak in France killed 40,000 people. It wasn't just physical pain. Ergotism triggers intense paranoia, vivid hallucinations, and extreme muscle contractions. When you ingest enough of it, your nervous system essentially short-circuits. You don't just see things, you become convinced your reality has been rewritten by a malevolent force. But it wasn't just the grain. Sometimes the madness came from the very tools they used to survive. Consider the obsession with lead. We associate lead poisoning with the fall of Rome, but the practice went much deeper. Ancient Romans used lead acetate to sweeten their wine. They lined their water pipes with the stuff. They even used lead-based makeup. By the 2nd century AD, lead neurotoxicity was likely rotting the brains of the ruling class. Lead displaces calcium in the brain. It disrupts the formation of synapses. It turns a logical leader into a paranoid, impulsive tyrant. History is filled with erratic emperors, but it's hard to tell where tyrant ends and heavy metal poisoning begins. Caligula and Nero are the usual suspects, but their behavior fits the clinical profile of chronic lead exposure almost perfectly. Then there is the mystery of the dancing plague of 1518. It started with one woman, Frau Trophea, who walked out into a street in Strasbourg and started dancing. She didn't stop. For 6 days she danced. Within a week, 34 others joined her. Within a month, 400 people were dancing in a state of wild, uncontrollable frenzy. They danced until their hearts gave out, their feet bled, and they collapsed, dead from exhaustion. It wasn't a party. It was a mass psychogenic illness. Today, we understand that these people were trapped in a feedback loop of stress, religious trauma, and starvation. When you live in a world of constant famine, plague, and the threat of eternal damnation, the human brain has a breaking point. Under extreme psychological pressure, the social fabric can snap. One person begins to twitch, the group mirrors it, and suddenly, a community is caught in a contagious physical hallucination. We like to think of our ancestors as primitive, but they were chemically and psychologically just like us. The difference is that they lived in a world where the boundaries of reality were far thinner. Take the case of the Salem witch trials in 1692. For years, historians debated whether the accusers were just playing a political game. But if you look at the meteorological data from that year, you find a perfect recipe for an ergot outbreak. A damp, cool winter followed by a damp spring. The rye was tainted. The children started experiencing convulsions, prickling sensations, and sensory hallucinations. They weren't lying. They were experiencing a physical, chemical shift in their consciousness. And in a society where science was non-existent, the only way to explain the unexplainable was to find a scapegoat. This reveals a dark truth about human history. Our sanity is fragile. It is held together by the food we eat, the water we drink, and the social stories we tell ourselves. When one of those pillars shifts, our perception of reality shifts with it. We look back at these events, the dancing, the poisoning, the witch trials, and we feel a sense of superiority. We think we have conquered the environment. We think our minds are locked in a cage of reason that no fungus or heavy metal can breach. But look at the modern world. We are surrounded by more synthetic chemicals than at any point in history. Our social structures are vibrating with the same kind of extreme, high-stakes pressure that triggered the dancing plagues of the past. We are not smarter than the people of 1518.
We are simply living in a different ecosystem.
Our ancestors were victims of the grain, the metal, and the mass panic of a superstitious age. But we have our own demons. They might not be caused by fungus in the rye, but the result is the same. A population struggling to maintain a grip on what is real. When we study the madness of the ancients, we aren't just looking at history, we are looking at a mirror. If the environment changed tomorrow, or if the chemical balance of our society tilted just slightly, how quickly would we slip? The history of human sanity is a history of narrow escapes. We are the survivors of a long, chaotic experiment, but the experiment isn't over. We are still here, standing on the edge of the same abyss our ancestors stared into, wondering if the voices we hear are real, or if, yet again, we are simply losing our minds to the world around us.